Joining us now is Joe DiGenova. It's funny. One thing about being Catholic is you can say I'm a good Catholic or a bad Catholic. It's hard for Protestants to say that because it's like, what's the measure, right? And so, Joe, I mean, you're as good a Catholic as I know. You're a better Catholic than Joe Biden, if that's the measure. So thanks for joining us this morning.
I'm delighted to be with you, and can't wait to see who the next pope is.
Yeah, that's. I think that we're all sort of like, yes, he was, a good man and a humble man, and he did this and he did that, but really eager to find the next guy. But anyway, he had his work cut out for him, didn't he, Joe? Coming in after two giant intellects like Benedict and JP2.
Well, I think there's no question about that. And I hope the experiment with South America is over. South America and Central America is over.
That's
and
fair to say.
We turn to the more traditionalist Catholic view of the papacy. But we shall see. We shall see. I mean, what's true about the papacy is true about the United States Supreme Court. There's trouble in heaven. And the bottom line is very simple. We need help, and we need it soon.
The comparison is apt. A lot of American Catholics trying to explain the role of the teaching office of the Vatican often points to the Supreme Court as an example. You've got your document, but then you need people to interpret it and apply it to today. So what in God's name happened over the weekend, Joe, with this decision to temporarily block deportations of trained de Aragua Venezuelans who the president has determined are members of a terrorist organization? Because I thought under the Alien Enemies Act, the Supreme Court had given a green light for this activity.
Well, something happened over the weekend that we may never know the full story of, but it is revolutionary in the sense that it appears that a group of law clerks on the court, some of whom associated with Ketanji Brown Jackson, let loose a series of conduct that mimics the leak of the Dobbs decision. And what you have is some left-leaning people on the court seeking to subvert its validity by screaming, "There's a fire in this theater," and seeking to have someone put it out without knowing whether or not there is, in fact, a fire in the theater. Over the weekend, the Supreme Court issued a ruling literally in the dead of night that stopped the deportation, not necessarily any deportation that was really going to happen, but an anticipated deportation of a group of people who were completely and properly deportable. But the court stopped it. And here's what's interesting. They did it while the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals was reviewing the matter without a ruling from the Fifth Circuit. They did it without hearing from the government, only hearing from the ACLU's brief, and 7 justices on the Supreme Court thought that was okay. And here's the worst part. Not only did they stop the deportation of those people in a purported class action lawsuit, not only did they stop their rendition out of the country under the Alien Enemies Act, they stopped it under all immigration law in the United States. Now, if you think that John Roberts thought by doing this he was going to stop attacks on the court, he is out of his mind. He has created a monster. And he's created a monster with the assistance of some lefty law clerks on the court. He's going to rue the day he never found out who leaked the Dobbs decision, because that gave license to lefty law clerks. And believe me, all this BS about all law clerks are the same, that's crap. That's absolute crap.
That's a stunning and terrifying development, to tell you the truth, Joe. What is the next step here? What is first of all, if you could, because I have not seen the deep dive here on the clerks sort of driving this train here. What are you hearing right now based on that, and who's reporting those details? Because that's a huge development.
Let's just put it this way: it is a well-known fact among people who observe the court that the lefty law clerks have been running amok up there since before the Dobbs decision was leaked And no one needs any better example of the way the court will demean itself than by issuing a ruling in the middle of the night, literally, and having, which, by the way, what's really offensive about this is that Roberts pretends to be a real stickler for procedure and propriety, and he didn't even allow the government to respond before they issued the order. I urge people, it's now readily available from LinkedIn from stories. Read Sam Alito's dissent.
Yes.
By the way, this order was issued so fast that you couldn't even have time to write a dissent. Alito had to wait until he had time to think and write, and issued his ruling, his dissent, on Sunday. This is disgusting. What John Roberts has done is demean the court, demean its processes, demeaned the legal system in the United States, invited legitimate criticism of his manner of running it. He has created anarchy on the court. It is unbelievable that a person who pretends to be devoted to the culture of regularity has now invited chaos as a way to run the court.
What is the next step here, Joe? How quickly can they reconvene and re-examine this? Because this is they keep throwing chaos around, chaos at the Pentagon, chaos in the economy, chaos with tariffs. No, this is judicial chaos that was unnecessary and implemented by Roberts. So how can they stem this?
The next step is prayer. Believe it or not, prayer, because this guy, Roberts, has seemed to have lost his moorings. Can you imagine? You have to think about this. This is like the midnight ride of Paul Revere. You're in the middle of the night, and the Supreme Court is issuing rulings without having heard from the Solicitor General of the United States. It is anarchy. It is outrageous, and the court is being run by law clerks. And John Roberts is responsible for it because he never got to the bottom of who leaked Dobbs. Yeah. It's like the Civil War. You either solve slavery or you're going to have a war.
Joe, Alito issued this dissent. Thomas joined it, but Gorsuch and Kavanaugh did not. I mean, given what you've laid out here, and
sleepy time gal, da da da, sleepy time gal.
They can't be bothered with such things. Is that what you're saying?
They are. These people. I don't know what Gorsuch's problem is. I love the guy. I love Kavanaugh, but and Amy Coney Barrett.
Well, we're not surprised by her.
I have lost. I mean, she is. Yeah. This is how you can sit there as someone who's supposed to be just so punctilious about this, that, and the other thing, a processor, somebody who worries about the dotting of the I's and the crossing of the T's, and let this crap masquerading as the Supreme Court ruling, this is outrageous what Roberts allowed to happen. This is what he has done to the court over the weekend. If they don't fix this, if they don't lift this stay, and if they allow this to stay in place where the President of the United States cannot deport anybody in this class, even using traditional immigration law, you want to talk about a crisis? John Roberts just created it.
All right, Joe, hold that thought. I want to talk through not only this issue, but also the conversation that's being had around this issue. You know, this whole co-equal branches, and the Supreme Court has the right to veto the executive, and the executive has nothing to do. Is that the case? What is the remedy here? Should Trump ignore it? We're going to ask Joe DiGenova all of that and more coming up in a moment. First, though, it's 7:15. WMAL traffic and weather every 10 minutes. First on the Fives with Jamie Whitten in the Hadid Carpet Cleaning Traffic Center.
Let's get you in through town and on New York Avenue. Here we go after South Dakota Avenue, lined up to the light at Bladensburg Road. And that's a good trip because just after that is where we had the crash, and that's been cleared. So we're back to our normal delays there. So no surprises. 295 southbound right as you merge out of Chevrolet, solid to get you past East Capitol Street and Pennsylvania Avenue. Now, where the struggle continues, Virginia commuters to get on to 395. Now delays as you come out of the Springfield Mixing Bowl. That takes you to the crash cleanup at King Street. Now it's going to be, it looks like the two left lanes getting by this crash. It was coming off of the exit from King Street, so still a bit of activity there. Now from GarageDoorRepair.com, the WMAL Stormwatch 7 forecast.
We've got mild day today on Easter Monday with some late day showers potentially, high around 75 degrees with cloudy skies. Tonight cloudy, and again chance of showers overnight with a low in the 60s. Tomorrow will be cloudy early, then we're looking at clearing skies with highs around 82, and Wednesday sunshine with a high around 80 degrees. Right now it's 59 degrees at Reagan National, 717.
WMAL, making sense of the news. Live from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios. Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
News and weather are brought to you by WAPA.
We continue with Joe DiGenova on this middle-of-the-night ruling by the Supreme Court, seemingly halting all deportations, potentially, depending on how you read what was said here, based on a class that has been determined without actually any definition of that class. And as Joe, you just pointed out, without the Solicitor General representing the Justice Department and the administration even being able to argue about this, Joe, what should the Trump administration do here? This, we hear constitutional crisis. It's certainly not of their making, but should they ignore this? Do they cede control of something like this to the Supreme Court, or does the Supreme Court have the final say on something like this?
Well, the Trump administration will continue to obey the rulings of the Supreme Court. There's no doubt about that. They are not going to not listen to the court. They've already taken steps to implement the court's ridiculous, stupid, midnight-loving order, which was issued in a heat of passion of stupidity. The bottom line is the Supreme Court rules supreme, and until that changes, they're going to obey it. Now, they're not going to be happy about it, and the Sowers filing late proves that, and they're going to file some more stuff with the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is teetering on the edge of irrelevancy. What's interesting about this is that you can't be this dumb. You really can't be this dumb and be a Supreme Court justice in the modern era. What in the name of God do they think is going to happen when you issue a ruling like this under these circumstances? You talk about instilling disrespect for the court. Nothing has done more for that than this idiotic ruling in the middle of the night. And I'll tell you something. If you want to look for who to blame for this, look at the United States Senate Republicans, who allowed every single nominee, nitwit, brain-dead, nut, leftist wacko, that two Democratic presidents wanted to put on the U.S. district courts, and they let them all go. You can count on one hand the number of judges that the Republicans in the Senate have stopped. What a bunch of weak knees. Unbelievable. And this is the result. You see these district judges all over the country ruling like lunatics? That is the direct result of wobbly-kneed Republicans in the United States Senate. God help us all.
Joe, I don't want to go conspiracy theory here, but I do think it's really, I want to get back to John Roberts and his leadership here. I've seen some rumors on Twitter, and I just want your opinion on this. He's friends with Norm Eisen and Michael Ludig. I mean, does this have any, what is your, is he just surrounded by, TDS sufferers, and this is sort of a personal thing for him? I'm really wondering about Robert's judgment here and the influence he's receiving.
He surrounds himself with an echo chamber of acolytes. Now, if you think that J. Michael Ludig, if you have watched him testify over the last several years before Congress, he is practically incoherent. By the way, I say this in light of the death of the Pope with grace, because I think J. Michael Ludig is suffering from some sort of mental problem. I don't mean mentally ill. I mean he's got some sort of regressive dementia type thing, which makes it almost impossible for him to speak. I'm sure he's a fine man and all that sort of stuff. But that aside, here's the problem with the anti-Trump syndrome. When you have Trump derangement syndrome, here's what happens. You not only lose your mind, you have no mind. And the reflexive, repulsive reaction to Trump is ignorant. The worst thing about it is that it is ignorant. And because you hate someone so much, your mind is blinded to the facts and the reality of what's happening in America. That ruling over the weekend by the Supreme Court is Trump derangement system symptom
Syndrome.
squared. That is exactly why you can't have this type of thing in public policy. You know, Trump, he did. You know what? I used to say for all of his flaws, screw it. He doesn't have any flaws. The problem is not with Trump. The problem is not with Trump. The problem is the Republican Party and the media are so. The Republicans are lazy. Have you heard any of them standing up and screaming about this ruling? I mean, listen, this has been going on since Saturday night. It's like crickets out there among Republicans. These people are watching the demise of the Supreme Court. What they need to do is say, you know what, Mr. Chief Justice, we're going to have a hearing on the Dobbs leak, and we're going to want you to come up and testify. What did you do? Who did it? Who was your prime suspect? Because when they didn't find out who leaked that opinion, they gave license to what happened over the weekend.
Yeah, and over a holiday weekend, by the way, it should be noted, too, which is why everyone is absent.
Who knew?
Who knew? Hey, quickly, Joe, if we could, and I know it's not an easy thing to get to quickly, but the argument seems to be that if you're saying this person is a member of this gang, that makes them a terrorist, so we can deport them, done deal, and I get that. Their argument is, okay, they should have a chance to prove that they're not a member of that gang. Am I missing something? That seems to be this due process question. Where does the law stand on something like that?
Well, I wish I knew, because I used to think that the law of the country was due process meant an administrative law judge, not a federal judge sitting in a court, but that a immigration judge could make that decision. Then there was an appeal to an immigration board, and then when that was over, that was it. You're gone. Well, now the Supreme Court says, you know what? Those 20 million people, somewhere between 12 and 20 million people who got in the country, we think that each one of them may very well be entitled to a full-blown trial in the United States District Court. Well, Mr. Chief Justice, how many federal judges do you think you're going to need to do 12 to 20 million cases? Let's see. They're all here. They may end up voting. We don't have any idea where they are. They're corrupting our country. They're raping children. They're trafficking in children and women. But let's just take our time and exercise due process so they can all have all the process they need. I mean, you are watching a Supreme Court preside over the dismantling of a free society. What an unbelievable bunch.
Always great to start our Monday with Joe DiGenova. Thank you, sir. And next time, don't hold back, please.
God bless. By the way, may he rest in peace. The Pope. For all of his faults, may he rest in peace. But I'm delighted that he's moved on.
Yeah. Well, delighted is not necessary. We wait with eager anticipation for the next.
I can't wait for the puff of white smoke.
Thank you, Joe.